This story begins with a night guard trying to escape through a grate, while an evil presence stalks him. The poor man sneaks through the ventilation ducts, crosses a room, and when he escapes, the silhouette of a terrible animatronic chases him. Suddenly, when the watchman is trapped behind a fence, the villain catches him. After this, the watchman is tied up and tortured by a deadly mask. The next day, a troublesome young man named Mike wakes up and avoids taking his medicine. He does some exercise, and asks his little sister Abby to hurry up to take her to school. Then a coworker reads something about sleep theory. Since Mike is having serious problems sleeping, by actively participating in different dreams during the workday as security in a shopping center, Mike observes a guy taking a child by force and by chasing him, and he beats him up in front of everyone. After the incident, Mike loses his job and has a date with Steve Raglan. A professional counselor scolds him for losing different jobs in a short time due to similar events, and asks him if he has any psychiatric problem. Although Mike avoids telling him that he imagines people who are not there, now Steve offers him a job opportunity as a night security guard with the only tasks of not letting anyone in and keeping the place clean. However, due to bad salary and worse hours, Mike rejects the offer, although the counselor leaves him his card in case he changes his mind. When he returns home, Mike receives an eviction notice in case he does not pay his debts, and greets the nanny Max, then talks a little with Abby and looks at her drawings, and goes to sleep, but not before taking some pills and putting some of nature noise to be able to rest. It turns out that Mike imagines being in Nebraska when he was a child with his parents and Garrett, his younger brother. However, in a flashback, it is revealed that due to a slight carelessness, Garrett ended up kidnapped by an adult. In the present, Aunt Jane requests an hearing with lawyers and the school principal to claim custody of Abby, because her nephew has trouble staying awake. Additionally, Jane suspects that the girl has mental problems from talking with imaginary friends, and asks her lawyer to give Dr. Lillian and Mike a request to go to court to fight for custody. Then the young man warns Lillian that Jane only wants a check from the government, and is not interested in the girl. The woman responds that if he wants to support his sister, he should hurry up and get a job to show that he has enough resources. So Mike ends up accepting the job of night guard. During the call with Steve, he offers a little context about the place he is going to. It was very popular in the 80s among children. It has been closed for many years and has not been demolished yet, because the owner is a very sentimental person. The security system is old but functional, it has lighting to the parking, and there are several cameras, although the electricity is very unreliable. Mike walks around the quite abandoned place, notices a sign, and when he turns on the switch in the main office, the sign for the Freddy Fazbears lights up. During the first night of work, Mike sits in the office to inspect the cameras, and finds an old tape video with his name. When placing it in the player, the young man watches a safety tutorial video. A girl named Kim welcomes him, congratulates him for being selected, and tells him that the pizzeria implemented innovative technology for its time by allowing strange animatronic dolls to come to life to move freely around the place, and interact with the guests. These characters have rechargeable and hidden lithium batteries, and just when Kim was going to introduce them, the tape seems to fail for a moment until it ends. After this, Mike puts on a security uniform, and goes out with his flashlight to tour the retro pizzeria. At that moment, he gets disturbed when he hears some noises, and when he follows it, he finds all the stored animatronics, and after a while, Mike goes back to sleep and has nightmares about Garrett, but this time some children appear behind him. When Mike goes out to chase them, he trips and wakes up at 6 in the morning, managing to survive the first night in the new job. Upon returning home, he apologizes to Max for not being able to pay her during this last time, and goes to his sister's room to greet her. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Sparky Jane and the Layer meet with Max and her brother, who apparently made a deal with the terrible woman in order to get evidence in against Mike in exchange for $200. However, not having solid evidence that the young man is a possible unstable criminal, Max's brother proposes breaking into Freddy's pizzeria to get him fired, and thus fulfill his part of the deal. At nightfall, Abby argues with her brother for wanting to accompany him to work, until the babysitter arrives, and at Freddy's, Mike falls asleep, always dreaming the same thing, until when chasing one of the children. Suddenly, Mike wakes up overwhelmed by a failure in the electricity, and an unbearable sound that comes out of the speakers. Then the police officer Vanessa arrives in surprise, and upon noticing Mike's real injury, she enters to help him. The kind woman tells him that she loved that place when they were a child. While she bandages his arm, she introduces herself and warns him that this pizzeria affects people, since the security guards never last long. Now Vanessa turns on the lights of the place, and mentions to him the topic of some missing children. Just before introducing him to the famous Animatronics giving his classic children's show, suddenly, due to a failure in the circuits, the dolls turn off, and the police remind him that in the 80s, there was a big news story about the missing children. Before leaving, she leaves him a guard badge officer, and asks him not to get too involved with work. Max's brother, named Jeff, takes advantage during the day to break in with Hanky Carl and ruin the whole place. Meanwhile, what they don't know is that the animatronics came to life at one point. Carl was in the kitchen, and he hears some strange noises until this happens. When he sees that horrible image, Hank flees and Jeff hears his partner's screams of pain. When he is captured, the animatronic called Bonnie comes out after him, and Jeff observes through the smaller camera's Chica next to Bonnie that looks directly in the eyes. Right there, something tries to enter to the office. Jeff is locked up and is killed by Foxy. Max enters the pizzeria because she doesn't know anything about her brother, takes a look and runs into Freddy Fazbear himself, when suddenly a human hand comes out from inside the doll's mouth, and they already end up with a nosy babysitter. Mike having problems with his sister, and if that were not enough, she discovers the change of custody papers that the evil Aunt Jane sent. After a while, Vanessa visits him to tell him that someone broke into the pizzeria by force, and that she found his sleeping pills, which makes him responsible for that. That's why the officer asks him for helps him understand what is happening, so she doesn't have to make a report that would harm him. Then Mike goes out for a walk and talks to her about Garrett. It turns out that when he was 12 years old he was kidnapped, and because of a scientific theory that says we never forget things, he believes he can go back to the same memory to find a detail to help him discover the culprit. He also confesses that he was left in charge of Abby, because his mother died recently, and his father could not bear the pain of the loss. Vanessa tries to help him by saying that he is lucky to have someone who loves him as much as Abby, and warns him not to stay again asleep at work. The second night, Mike has no choice but to take his sister to work. Because he can't contact Max, he makes a makeshift tent for little Abby, who imagines she is at a camp, and then goes out to clean up the mess that Jeff made. After a few hours, Mike falls asleep again and someone breaks into the office calling Abby. The girl cannot wake up her brother, and follows the voices to the stage, where the animatronics are activated. In the dream, Mike understands that the children are the ones who disappeared in the 80s, and tries to make a pact, so that help him find Garrett. Right there the boy disappears, leaving a drawing of a rabbit on the sand, and Mike wakes up upset not seeing his sister. When he hears the girl scream, he finds all the animatronics around him. Then Abby calms him down, saying that they were only tickling her, and introduces Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica. Mike is disturbed when he doesn't understand how they can be alive without anyone to control them, and the girl says goodbye to her new friends, managing to survive. The third night, that morning, Mike checks Abby's drawings, and discovers that for months she was drawing the missing children who supposedly they were her imaginary friends. So during breakfast, the girl reveals to him that the voices she hears are ghosts, and her brother tells her the story about Garrett. Apparently Abby made a drawing of her deceased brother being kidnapped without knowing the story, which is why Mike asks her for help to understand what is it about. The girl tells him that the blonde-haired boy showed her those things, and that the children's ghosts only talk about a yellow rabbit. At dusk, Vanessa is paralyzed looking at a drawing of the rabbit holding the children's hands, and when Mike arrives with his sister, she tells him that the children speak very well of Vanessa. Mike understands that the ghost children possess the giant robots. He asks his sister to be careful because it can be dangerous to play with them. However, she builds a fort next to the Atronics, so they can spend the night together in pure fun.
Are you okay?
A while later, Mike is struck by the fact that Vanessa knows so much about that place, and the different animatronic costumes. She tells him that he must leave the past behind if he wants to be safe, until Abby has a small accident trying to play Bonnie's guitar. Hours later, Vanessa warns Mike that he is forbidden to take his sister again. After surviving the fourth night, the young man makes a call and frustrates his sister by showing her that he asked Aunt Jane for help to take care of her. However, the girl goes up to her room furious, and ruins all the drawings she made of her brother. At dusk, Mike prepares for the next day of work and falls asleep, trying to solve the mystery of Garrett. In his dreams, the blonde boy shows him a false scene in which he could have his brother and his parents as if nothing had happened. In exchange for handing over Abby, Mike breaks down in tears because he doesn't know what to do, and when he remembers his sister's face, he realizes that all of this is wrong until the ghost children disappear. While Foxy approaches the office in reality, Mike yells at the children to stay away from his sister, although he ends up very hurt. When escaping from the dream, the young man wakes up just before being killed by the mortal mask, and manages to flee until the animatronics capture him again. In addition, Freddy sneaks to Abby's house, knocks out Jane, and the blonde boy manipulates Abby into taking a taxi to the pizzeria. Right there, Vanessa rescues Mike, revealing that she knows all the damage that possessed robots cause. Freddy arrives with Abby, while the police officer confesses to Mike that in '80s, the detectives couldn't find the children in the pizzeria, and that the man who took them was someone very bad and cruel. Then the kidnapper, who was also very smart, decided to hide his victims in the only place that the parents and the police would never look for, so the remains of the children are still inside the animatronics. Despite not being evil beings, the kidnapper influences them in some way and manages to control them. Unfortunately, the girl finally confesses that the real person responsible is called William Upton, who turns out to be her father. When he looks at the photo of the man dressed as a yellow rabbit with his little daughter, Mike realizes that Garrett was one of his victims. When he notices a small toy plane that now belonged to him, Vanessa mentions that electricity is the key to stop them and save Abby. With some tasers they will be able to alter the circuits momentarily, and Mike sneaks into the pizzeria through a back entrance that has been sealed for years. While the animatronics seduce the little girl, her brother breaks into the place through a ventilation duct, Freddy and Boney dancing on the stage. While Chica takes the girl, Mike throws some water on the stage and with a little electricity manages to knock down the first two. Just when the girl was about to hurt Abby, her brother appears to save her. During the escape, another evil doll catches Mike and makes him lose his electric weapon. While the girl tries to escape, the young man fights against the animatronic, and manages to recover the weapon to deactivate it. At the same time, the terrible Foxy stalks Abby, who hides in one of the games. Mike continues looking for his sister, until the yellow rabbit comes out to confront him. Mike shoots him, and when he sees that the electricity it doesn't hurt him, he gets a beating. Abby was about to be discovered. Just when Vanessa shows up to rescue her and ruin the doll, the yellow rabbit tells Mike that now he can kill him, as he kicks him hard, and wakes up all his animatronics. The gang gathers around the rabbit until Vanessa decides to overcome her fears, and confront her father, who ends up being the supposed counselor who selected Mike. She shoots him in the arm. Abby wakes up her brother, and Mike asks her to tell the truth to the ghost children, so that they can escape from the control of the yellow rabbit. She draws a drawing, while Vanessa faces her father and ends up in the worst way, after hanging up the drawing of a yellow rabbit, ending up with the children. The light in the place goes out and the animatronics rebel against their master. In this way, William Upton's own suit turns against him, and ends up with him, while the place destroyed to pieces and the dolls hide, taking the yellow rabbit in what is called a spring lock failure. Some time later, Mike and Abby resume their lives normally after overcoming a tragedy, and the boy visits Vanessa, who ended up in a coma in the hospital due to her father's stabbing. At the pizzeria, the blonde boy observes William suffering from pain and decides to leave him locked in the kitchen, in revenge for what he finally did to them, and the movie ends.